Greetings, campers.
And welcome to today's CSARN TELUS webinar. My name is Scott Walker. I'm the Executive Director of CSARN, and like you, I am an elder professional artist. It is a pleasure today to welcome professional artists from all over Canada, literally from Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador to Gabriola Island in BC. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we all live, work, create, and travel on the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples that have cared for this land, now called Canada, since time immemorial. We acknowledge this as part of our covenant with all First Nations to share, respect, and protect the land in the spirit of peace and friendship for ourselves and for the future generations of all nations. Here in Toronto, it's a beautiful day. I mean, it's 9 degrees. We're supposed to get up to 14 tomorrow, and the sun is shining. But we know this is just a false harbinger of spring. We know that it's just setting us up for the next blizzard that's probably right around the corner. We know there's lots of winter still to come, and it'll be a while before spring is really here. So what do we do in the meantime? Well, we're going to find out today. Wellness in winter is the topic. Let me introduce our speaker today, our expert. She is a clinical social worker and psychotherapist. She is a certified mindfulness meditation coach, and she's an active member of the CSARN community, an actor and a member of the Act 3 Collective. And if you participated in the on-salons, you will probably recognize her. Please welcome Jory Morrow. Jory?
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Wellness in Winter. And thank you, Scott and Solange, and all of the good people at CSARN for inviting me here this afternoon. I also want to say that I'm a very proud member of CSARN, and I'm really proud to be a member of this senior artistic community. I understand that there's bright sun in a number of places in Canada, with the exception of our Eastern Province members and friends. You are in winter. So having said that, I think what I'd like to start off by saying is that our mood and our state of mind is very much like Canadian weather. In fact, it could be all happening at the same time within the same hour. We could have a stormy mood, it can be raining, it can be sunny and bright and beautiful, it can be just windy as can be. Our mood changes and reflects the environment that we're living in and our seasons. So I just really want to say that to begin with. And I also want to say that I had the privilege of being on Aboriginal Voices Radio for a couple of years. And I was doing some presentational talks there with an Indigenous elder on women's mental health. And we did a talk on seasonal affective disorder. And her name was Joanne Dallaire, and Joanne turned to me. We were doing a lot about how people get the blues and people get the blahs in winter and feel low and sluggish. And she said, yes, but Jory, we're all animals, and animals hibernate, and we are affected by our environment, by the seasons. And we know that instinctively, that we feel different in the winter than, say, the summer. We have different energy, we need different kinds of food and sleep. And so I remember thinking, yeah, she's right. We are animals and we should be slowing down. And perhaps we should cut ourselves a bit of slack this time of year. I think what happens is that that's sort of a counterbalance to a lot of the values that we've internalized through our society, through our economic systems, where we need to be driven and productive and goal-oriented and achieve. And I think if we can somehow be aware that that isn't always serving us very well, that might be a good place to start. I also want to say that I'm going to be covering a lot of material. You may want to take some notes or not. I'm asking that people leave questions till the end, if possible. That would be very helpful. I am in Toronto myself, better known and also known, pardon me, as Tekaronto. And yeah, I hope that, and I'll say this, that everyone arrives with an open heart, open mind. This may be a refresher for many of you. You may be hearing things you've known for a long time, so we're kind of reviewing, or you may be hearing things for the first time. I just want you to know that if something doesn't resonate for you, doesn't work for you, that's okay. Just push it aside. But if something does work for you, then maybe this is a bit of a launching, if you will, today, a springboard, maybe a planting a bit of a seed that may inspire you to go on and explore other things that could be helpful, may be helpful to wellness in wintertime. So if we could have the next slide, please, Solange. Objectives, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So the first thing I'm going to cover is things we can and can't control. Many of you may recall the Serenity Prayer and knowing the difference. I'm going to teach the two-dart parable. I'm going to talk about the concept or phrase, I learn what I believe as I hear myself speak. I'm going to look at mindfulness practices. We're going to look at a definition, mindfulness in very tiny little moments that you can add and integrate throughout your day. I'll be leading us through the golden pause. We'll look at the three-part breathing practice. And then there's another slide that I put together to incorporate more mindful gaps and pauses throughout your day. None of us, or most of us, I would think, cannot sit on the Himalayas all day or in a cave meditating. So what we need to do is try and integrate that kind of practice into our busy everyday lives. Number 3, affirmations that will assist with negative thinking patterns. Number 4, we'll look at general tips for wellness. And when I say that, I really want to emphasize, I think we all know this, you know, that there's tips that we've all incorporated to help us feel better. So maybe a bubble bath, herbal tea, go out for a walk, hug your pet. We know these things. These are in popular culture. These are things that we've tried many times. So I won't be talking about those kinds of tips so much, even though they have tremendous value. I'm going to go into slightly different directions with this today, but be mindful of the fact that there's so many things you can do for your own self-care. And finally, I'm going to lead us through a self-compassion guided meditation based on the wonderful work of Kristen Neff, and you can find her work online. She teaches, she has YouTube free videos of guided meditation. She's wonderful. And then lastly, a thought, being kind to yourself is good for the world. The Dalai Lama, which means we have to start with ourselves. We have to fill up the tank. We have to put that oxygen mask, like they say in the airlines, on ourselves first. And we have to restore and rejuvenate so that we have something to give back. It's as simple as that, and it's as hard as that. Okay. One final comment. I do teach also a class on creativity, since I'm speaking to a community of artists, and mindfulness. And this comes out of the work of a director in New York City who actually started doing mindfulness meditation before and after rehearsals and found it improved cognition, memory, focus, concentration, creativity, opening spaces, brainstorming, all kinds of benefits, relaxation in the body and alert mind. So for those of you who want to think of this in connection to your art making, it also has really good application for that. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm going to start with things you can and can't control. So I'm going to start with the stuff that's probably more difficult for most humans. And this is not a definitive list. There are probably many things, but this is just a start anyway. So I'm going to start on the left with the things that you can't control. And that is definitely other people's thoughts, opinions, criticisms, or responses to us and to life in general. We can't do anything about this, but what we can control is how we respond to it. So we can control how we respond to criticism of ourselves, our art, our world. We can make choices around whether we agree with it or not, whether we are going to pay attention to it or not, whether we're going to respond to it or not. So there are choices involved in that as well. We can't control the thoughts that pop into our head. The brain, the mind is just an organ that produces thoughts. That's what it does. And quite frankly, most of the thoughts we have aren't true. They're benign. They're just floating. Think of bubbles floating to the surface. So we really can't control these thoughts, but we can again control how we respond to them, what we do with them, how we manage them, how we navigate them. Next, everything that happens in life, we can't control what happens in life most of the time. And this is a really hard one for people. We know this from our experience. So much happens to us that we didn't see coming, we didn't anticipate, we weren't prepared for. And this is part of being alive. It is part of living, the ever-flowing change of life. Next, we can't control that others will meet your needs, or you can't control that they'll put your needs first. We wish that would happen more often, probably, but we can't control for this. So again, what we can do is try and take some kind of action on this. Maybe we need to ask for help, even though that may make us feel vulnerable or dependent. Sometimes it's a good plan. Maybe we need to let others know how we're feeling, express ourselves. Maybe we need to identify, first of all, what our need is, because a lot of times we don't know. We can't articulate that need. And then we need to figure out what is it we need in that moment to alleviate whatever discomfort or pain or challenge we're having, and meet our own needs. We are interconnected. We are social beings, but sometimes our expectations, I guess, may get us into trouble. We can't control if we succeed or not. And I encourage you to define success for yourself. It doesn't need to be what's popular to other people, or it doesn't need to be what the mainstream culture decides. We define what success is. And even though we may not always be successful, we know that as artists, we know that at this point in our life, we can learn, we can grow, and we can improve from any perceived or real setbacks. And the brain keeps growing and it keeps developing. Neuroplasticity, we know, continues until we die. And that's amazing. That's great news. So yeah, define success for yourself and understand that we can keep improving and growing. We can't control the health and wellness of other people. This is something that we all struggle with. We wish we could. There are times when we see our loved ones or dear friends doing things that we don't agree with. We wish, we're different. But the truth is, people have their own agency over their own lives. They can self-determine, make decisions for themselves. And it can make us feel quite helpless. But know that your care and concern comes from a good place. And they know that, I'm sure. And it comes from a place of love. Finally, we'll go back. Finally is we can't control, thank you, we can't control directly how we feel. Our feelings just come up. Our feelings arise very much like our thoughts, those bubbles. We can be quick to react. And sometimes our feelings are very intense. Sometimes they're quite pervasive and overwhelming. And the other thing, I guess, if I leave you with anything, is we can control or manage or learn to control how we respond to those feelings. We don't have to be a victim. I call it a victim of our own feelings. That doesn't need to happen if we learn the tools and the skills to self-regulate and de-escalate ourselves and be really aware of some of the things that we need to do to intervene before we get to a point where we feel very overwhelmed. Okay, what we can control. So we can control our own health and our own wellness within reason. Of course, we have genetics that we're wrestling with and environmental factors as well, but we can make lifestyle choices, typically diet, exercise, sleep. And you arrived today. You made the decision to come here today, which is a commitment to yourself and your own wellness. So feel good about that. We can control what we tell ourselves. what we tell ourselves. And it's really at this point that I'd like to, I'd like to talk to you about the two dart parable. So the two dart parable comes from ancient Eastern traditions. It's a philosophy, if you will. And I would say, I'll describe the first dart. The first dart is when something actually happens to us, something that creates some kind of, and I'm going to use the word suffering. That may be too much for some people. You can always change the language I'm using and substitute with challenge or difficulty or discomfort. But something happens to you that causes you some kind of suffering. And that's the first start. So I'm going to use something very, very concrete. Let's say I have a very severe pain in my knee and it's bothering me and it's painful and it's throbbing and I've injured it. So that's the first start. That's something that's real. That's based in fact. It's clinical. It's real. The second dart is what I call something that we do, which is layering on top of that first dart. All the stories we tell ourselves, all the things that we say about the first dart. So if I have a sore knee, I may impose that layer of thinking and stories and narrative. Poor me, why me? This hurts, this is awful. My mother had arthritis, my grandmother had arthritis. I'm getting old, I'm disabled, this is terrible. I don't want surgery, I'm not calling that doctor. And before you know it, we start to spiral. We've all been there. We start to spiral down and down into a pit. And we become paralyzed by this kind of self-talk. But we have a choice. We can use that second dart to either turn that around and layer up with more positive comments like, this is a pain, I know this isn't great, but I can call my doctor, I can, or leave the second dart alone. So that's the two dart parable. And really pay attention to what you tell yourself, what you say, your own self-talk, that inner dialogue. We can all get on that hamster wheel where we're just spinning, and it's called brooding rumination, where we just repeat, but we can try and intervene before that gets to be too much, too overwhelming. We have control over our interests and hobbies, that's obvious. Again, there's folks here probably from rural communities and urban alike. So it will depend on proximity and services in your communities and your own personal resources, but certainly we can control for that. We can also control what we pay attention to. So this is where the negative confirmation bias comes in. And we've probably heard this term. What it really means is we become very hyper alert to any threat or danger in the environment. And then we start looking for it. Our brain becomes, I call it the panic or the hyper alert brain. We start looking for everything that's wrong in the environment, and we only pay attention to that. So there is some evidence, of course, that this is part of our survival, it's part of our evolution, but if it's always triggered, then we can get very burnt out and we can get very stressed out. So my invitation to all of you is to, yes, pay attention, of course, to something that is alarming or dangerous, certainly dangerous, but also try to balance that out. I'll talk about that again later, to, I guess, what's happening in the environment that's an improvement, that's good, paying attention to what's working as well as what's not working. Because we have a tendency to go to one side of that only. And we do have agency over what we pay attention to. I'm going to invite you to understand and appreciate that there's nothing more precious than time and energy, which is the last two. And we can control how we spend our spare time, make choices, be deliberate, be intentional. You made a choice today, this afternoon, to join us, which I'm so glad you did, but also understand that, if we end up on the screens all the time, how much of that is robbing us of other things that we could be doing. So being more conscious of those habits and where we put our energy, and protect that energy. Understand which situations in our lives take energy from us, because there's limits to it as human beings, right? We have limits to everything. So thank you. I encourage you to think about that further on your own, but really trying to understand and appreciate that we can control things, especially how we respond to life and how we respond to difficulty in our life. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Yes, yes. Okay, so we're going to move and shift now. Thank you, Solange. We're going to shift now to mindfulness meditation, and we'll just pause on this slide for a moment. Yeah, so mindfulness, it's really floating around quite a bit out there. Again, I need to acknowledge and respect that it comes from ancient Eastern traditions, and we've borrowed it in the West and we've modified it to suit clinical medical needs. I teach it from a secular perspective, evidence-based, research-based. There's so many studies that prove that it's very beneficial. It's in prisons now, it's in schools, it's in hospitals. It's being used to enhance wellness in many, many different ways and treat disease, a lot of different kinds of disease. I've been meditating for 24 years on and off. I've been teaching for quite some time. And yeah, you may have a sense and a familiarity with it or not. There may be people here who've never even thought about it, never tried it. That's okay. I'm going to start off very small and introduce very slight practices. I don't want people to get overwhelmed. Mindfulness meditation is like a muscle. It's gradual, it's accumulative. You have to build your tolerance and build your strength for it. So mindfulness literally means awareness. And mindfulness meditation practice means to be, I think, aware of your moment by moment experience as things arise right here, right now, without judgment. And the without judgment part is probably the hardest for human beings because we're very attached to our opinions, our preferences, what we like, don't like, what we're indifferent to. So meditation and mindfulness tries to loosen that up, to create more space, more light, if you will, so that we can be more receptive to both what's happening inside, but also what's happening externally. So we can enjoy our life and we can receive the richness and the beauty of the world that we live in. And it really means, it's a bold statement sometimes to look at mindfulness as radically saying yes to the life that we have before us. All of it, murky, messy, muddy, imperfect. No one is perfect. Nobody has a perfect life. So mindfulness meditation allows us to just take a look at some of these things with a much more deliberate focus. Okay. One of the things I'd like to teach you now, and I'm going to ask folks to please indulge me here, is I'd like to teach you what's called the golden pause. And if you're sitting, that's ideal, if you can sit. If not, you can stand, or if you're lying down, we can still do this. But the golden pause is a way to tune out and check in with yourself throughout the day. You can do this as frequently as you want, as frequently as you need to. Yeah, so let's try it. Let's give it a whirl. So we're going to sit back and we're going to just sit in a nice, easy, comfortable position. I don't want anyone straining, anybody having any pain, and just alert mind, comfortable, relaxed body. And I'd like you to, if this is available to you, if you feel comfortable doing this, I'd like you to just ever so briefly, I'm going to do it with you. I'd like you to just close your eyes and connect to your breath, and taking a couple of really lovely, easeful, deep breaths. And open your eyes. So that golden pause, some people report that it feels like they've slowed down, they've put the brakes on something, they suddenly become aware of sounds in the environment, they suddenly become aware of their thoughts, of their body. And I think it's important to use it if we feel like our life is racing, if our thoughts are racing, if things are starting to feel a little chaotic, a little messy, maybe, we're not quite sure, okay, like what's happening, and you want more stability, you want to feel more grounded, you can use that golden pause, 20 times a day if you need to. And let's try it again, just for practice sake. Let's try it again. We'll all close our eyes together and take a couple of deep breaths. And open your eyes. And just notice for a moment if that had any effect at all on your body. So, if you really want to be successful with the golden pause, you need to try and attach it to something very tangible and concrete. So you might decide, I'm going to do a golden pause every time I touch a doorknob and proceed. Or I'm going to do a golden pause every time I go from one room to the next. Or I'm going to stop when I'm writing and do a pause. Or I'm going to stop while I'm cooking or gardening or walking. And just take in a moment to reflect and to really experience what's happening. And it just creates a bit of space. So I really hope that you can engage in that as a tool to help you with stress and to help you tune in a bit more. You can do a golden pause when you're waiting for the computer, if you're on hold with the government or whoever on hold on the phone, you can do it. Some people might even do it if they're going on stairs. They'll slow down when they're doing the stairs and stop and just do a bit of a pause, waiting for the kettle to boil, looking outside. The golden pause, I really want to emphasize this too. The golden pause also helps us access the goodness that passes through our life, right? Sometimes the goodness and the beauty and the joy in our life gets flung aside because we're so busy, we're not paying attention, and we miss it all. And that's the stuff that makes our lives feel enriched, and we get more satisfaction. And it could be anything. It could be, a smile a baby gives us, or a cute dog, or children laughing, or a garden, or something, anything, bird song, something where we take a moment and we really absorb it and allow it to be received and to affect us. We don't want to miss the good stuff. Okay, now I'd like to go on to another mindfulness practice. This one's going to be a bit longer. Again, it's one of those practices that you can check in, you can go inward, and you can just do a little bit of inventory as to what exactly is going on. We've all been in situations, now it has to feel safe, of course, but we've all been in situations where things are just getting ahead of us. Things are running away from us. So I'm going to invite all of you once again to sit in a comfortable position if that's available to you. And if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes, or you can do what's called soft eyes. You can cast your eyes down towards the floor in a kind of unfocused way, if you prefer that. And to teach this, I'm going to take longer than it would actually take for you. It's called the 3-part breathing practice. And yeah, I'll take a bit of time just to teach it. But I'm going to ask you to just maybe pay attention to your posture and, how you're holding your hands, perhaps in your lap or at your side. Are they sort of palms upward or downward, in a cup position, just giving a little bit of attention and decision making around how you're sitting. Both feet firmly planted on the floor. And yeah, if you can, close your eyes. And when I count to three, we'll begin. 1, 2, 3. I'd like you to start by connecting to breath and just taking a couple of very deep breaths, whatever is available to you, not changing anything, not doing anything. Just noticing the body breathing. And I'd like you to shift your attention from the body breathing and go into the area of thought, of thinking, and asking yourself the very simple question, what is happening in my thoughts right now? What is happening in my thinking? And what's the quality of my thinking? If it helps, you can do a labeling technique and name the thoughts or the quality of your thoughts. So it could be worry or planning, could be racing, or it could be calm, could be peaceful thinking, thoughts that arise about the past, maybe thoughts that arise about the future. What is going on in my thinking this afternoon? And now that we've explored thinking, I'm going to ask you to allow that to be, allow that to pass, and reframe and redirect your attention to your feelings, to your emotions. And asking the same question, what is happening in my emotions? What is happening in my feelings this afternoon? And if it helps, you can label your emotions. Could be joy, excitement, could be grief, sorrow. Could be whatever you want it to be. And just checking in and exploring that for a moment. And once you've finished exploring your emotions and your feelings, you can release that attention and shift and lean in towards the body. And the same question, what is happening in the body this afternoon, from head to toe? Just doing a little inventory. Moving down through the body. And if there's a part of your body that's calling to you that is a little bit tense or sore or tender, just sending that part of the body some loving kindness, some friendliness and support. You may notice other parts of the body and other sensations like tingling or cold or heat. And just landing there and sending it some tenderness and kindness. And now that you've explored the body and body sensations, I'd like you to shift your attention to sound, noticing sound, more outward now. What are the sounds you're aware of? Sounds in the room, sounds outside the room, perhaps sounds in your own body, the sound of your heartbeat, the sound of your own respiration. And when I count to 3, you can open your eyes and return. 1, 2, 3. And have a little stretch if you need to. Have a little stretch. So this is a meditation that you can do to drop out of what's called automaticity. Automaticity, meaning automatic pilot, racing from one thought to the next, activity to the next, really trying to slow things down. And you have the right to take your time. Jory says, you have the right to take your time and you have the right to slow down. That is something that I think this particular meditation is helpful for. It would be much faster than that. You would basically, what I did there was I got you to breathe and connect to breath. That's taking you inward, closing your eyes, you're blocking out distraction, you're going into thoughts, feelings, and body. It's the three parts. I also add on sound at the end so that I can gently bring everyone back out and start the more outward focus again. But you could easily do that. You could do that even in public if you did unfocused gazes down towards the floor. Nobody knows what you're doing. And you're just going inward and you're asking yourself, what's happening in my thoughts, feelings, and body? So that's another tool for you to try. I think mindfulness is something that seems kind of mysterious to a lot of people, but it is literally a practice that we need to repeat. If you're ever going to indulge in this any further or explore it, I would suggest you start a practice and you do it in the morning. It sets the tone for your day. And there are practices for sleep, better sleep, called the body scan. And I would also suggest that you look up the work of Tara Brach, T-A-R-A, Brach, B-R-A-C-H. She does some wonderful work. She's also a psychotherapist. She's one of my mentors for sure. And she has free guided meditations. And there's 101 ways to meditate for many different reasons. Meditation isn't for everyone. I want to say that. If you're really anxious and really escalated and have too much high frequency kind of energy that you need to offload, then I would recommend doing mindful movement. And that would be stretching, gentle stretching, walking, mindful walking, hopefully in nature. And, just some very, very gentle, mindful movement, because it's just too hard for some people to sit in stillness and silence. It really is. But if you can, then the more you practice, the better. Some people have very formal practices where they have a dedicated space. They've set up mats and things and candles or whatever suits them. If that's something you want to explore, by all means. But my goal today is just to try and integrate more mindful moments. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at the slide. I'll just go through this quickly. This is something that I composed together, I put together for this particular presentation. So one, come back to the present moment. And you can always do that with your breath. Your breath is your anchor. The body will ground you. Come back to the breath. Simply ask yourself, what is going on right now in my body, thought, and feelings? What's happening around me right now? And this will usually leave us feeling clearer, more whole, and even with the difficult and the uncomfortable. And meditation is building your resilience for that, right? It's the window of tolerance. It's building that window of tolerance so that when these things come at us, we're not so, shaken, and we can ride the waves. We've heard that expression, ride the waves of emotion and reactivity. Number two, find your key to mindfulness. So what does that mean? It means some people that I've taught, I give them a stone, or I give them a little gem, or a little something, a symbol. This is a little Buddha that I have. It could be a picture. It could be a piece of jewelry, but you're going to have it. You're going to have it in your hand or in your pocket, and it's a little key to open the door to mindfulness. It's a cue to tell us, okay, it's time for me to do a golden pause or the 3-part breathing practice. I need to shut down and check out for a minute because I need to rest. So you want a key, you want something that might inspire you to do that. Yeah, and if you don't have one, as I've written here, you can use your hand, or you can use your foot, or you can connect to the contact points in your chair or the floor that are supporting you. Those can also, this is really what's formally called a focus or object meditation. It really doesn't matter what it is, but I like to use inspiring things. So find your key to mindfulness. Number 3, reduce input, very obvious. No distractions if possible. Shut the window, turn everything off, unless you're doing an online meditation, of course, and really create a dedicated, respectful space for you to do these practices. Number 4, leave gaps or pauses. And again, trying to reduce stimulation. So many of us are uncomfortable with silence and with stillness. We've actually been conditioned to really be busy all the time. In fact, Indigenous therapists work with silence. They're really good at it. And it's not a training I've had, but meditation will help us to work with that. And the pauses and the gaps are really where the silence is, where the richness is. That's when the insights come up. Insight meditation really is about cultivating your own inner therapist, right? You're trying to gain more reflection and more insight. So more gaps, more pauses. And again, as I said earlier, it allows you to really experience your life. We don't want to let it all just fly by. All the goodness too. We want to pay attention. So yeah. So number 5, if we could have the next slide, please. Number 5, pay attention to transitions. So transitions are perfect for mindful moments. Perfect. When you're doing the stairs, go slowly, break it down. Try and do a walking kind of up the stairs meditation, if you will. Doorknobs, thresholds, waiting for anything really gives you an opportunity to be mindful and to meditate with full awareness and making conscious transitions so that you're fresh, you're alert, you're satisfied, and you're approaching things with newness, with a beginner's mind, as the meditators call it, a curious mind. 6, multitasking. Yeah, humans are not meant to multitask, even though we do it quite a bit. And we can only be effective for short periods of time before we start getting burnt out and stressed out, and then we're at risk of making more mistakes, all kinds of things. We are not, contrary to popular opinion, we are not more productive. We are not more creative. It just makes things that much more chaotic. So mindfulness helps us. If we have to multitask, because sometimes we do, then we can do it mindfully. Okay, I've got to do 6 things at the same time, and I'm going to do them with my full attention, and hopefully with more balance and more wholeness as a result. Number 7, remember things change. So I stuck my own little bits at the end here. Remember things change. Life is complicated. Anticipate change. Anticipate that underlying truth. Our bodies change, people change, situations. We know this. It's really hard to accept that. Even the negative things, even things that we don't like will change. And that's the good news, right? Mindfulness meditation is about letting go. It's a practice of letting go. And so the good news is that even the moods that we have that feel debilitating and paralyzing, that will pass. We know that because of the ever-flowing change of life. This is what happens to all of us. Meditation will help us, though, tune in to any hidden opposition or resistance to change that could be making us suffer. So the meditators, I think the equation, yes, is suffering equals pain times resistance. Suffering equals pain times resistance. The more we resist, the more we suffer. It doesn't mean we acquiesce. We're not collapsing into something. Doesn't mean we lose our agency over ourselves and our life. It just means that we notice, we see something clearly. It's right there in front of us. And finally, complexity isn't an illusion. Life is messy. Life is difficult. The more we are in the present moment, at least then we can see clearly how baffling and how difficult life is. And maybe a new and different understanding will emerge. I am not, I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of the whole positivity movement, positive psychology. If it works for you, great, I'm happy for you. But I think, and we're going to get into affirmations, which also looks at that. I think Michael J. Fox, I remember when he wrote his first book, he said he was a realist. He said, and that spoke to me, because the way he framed it in kind of a metaphor was the pessimists are always looking down and they are going to bang into a wall. The optimists are always looking up and they're going to fall into a big hole. But it's the realists that are looking straight ahead, straight in front of them, and not leaning into one side or the other. So I think meditation helps us to sit with that. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Affirmations. Affirmations come from the positive psychology movement. They are a part of our self-talk in the toolbox. And yes, we all talk to ourselves. Yes, we do. It's very important. It's how we problem solve. It's how we brainstorm. It's how we figure things out. But affirmations are an actual tool to interrupt some negative thinking patterns. And I'll just walk through this with you all. If you can look at the slide, affirmations consist of three parts. The first part, and this is why I don't like the positive psychology movement. I find actually it's quite dismissive sometimes, invalidating and trivializing. If you've ever been in a position where you said to someone, you know, I feel depressed or I feel sad or whatever, and they're like, oh, you'll get over it. Don't worry about it. It's fine. That actually doesn't usually help very much. There's no space then for people to talk about how they feel. So I think with these affirmations, there's a little bit more space to actually express ourselves and then to look at things potentially from a different point of view. So affirmations, three parts. The first part is acknowledging, normalizing, and validating how you feel. That's important. The second part is some word that links the two thoughts together. So that would be and, but, or, also, those kinds of words. And the third part is, I would say, an alternative perspective, a reframing, if you will, based on our experience. And sometimes these feel artificial and they feel strange, like they're not the language that we would choose. So I'm going to invite you to pick language that speaks to you and that is affirming. Examples on the right side is I care and I don't care. It matters and it doesn't matter. Those ones are trying to take some of the heat and the weight and the pressure off, because we can get entangled and we can get over-identified and over-invested in something to the point, I know I've done it, where it starts to cause me too much reactivity and I'm too escalated and it's not good for me. So sometimes the second half of that is kind of trying to not take away responsibility. And it's not a sellout, but it's basically, yeah, I care about that meeting and I don't care. It matters, of course, the dinner party matters that I'm going to have. Of course it does. And it doesn't matter. It's just trying to take pressure off of us and give us a little bit of space. I'm nervous, but this will pass. We've all been nervous. We've all been there. Our life experience teaches us, tells us that it will pass. I'm sad, but I can cope with this. So you can see how the first part is really naming and labeling what is going on. Name it to tame it, right? If we push things away, they get, feelings, emotions, like experiences. If we push stuff away, they get bigger, they get more powerful, it takes over, and then we're really in trouble. So, we can be preventative and try using some of this self-talk to help us get through some of these difficulties. I'm tired and I know I can rest, or I'm tired and I know I'll get through this day. I want things to change, but I know some changes take longer than others. And I think the last one might be, I'm trying and I'm doing the best that I can. And that's all any of us can do. Okay, thank you. Make it specific, make them your own. You can write them down on a piece of paper and put it in your wallet to look at. You can write it in your phones, perhaps, have it available to you. You say these out loud and they will stick even better. Because going back to the other teaching I wanted to give you, I learn what I believe as I hear myself speak. What? What's that? I learn what I believe as I hear myself speak. That comes from motivational interviewing techniques. And essentially it comes from therapeutic modalities where we want our clients to say the change they want to see in themselves. Because if I say it out loud, then I'm going to buy into it. I'm going to believe it a lot more than if somebody else says it to me. So the language we choose to describe ourselves, to describe other people or the world we live in is very profound and has a big impact on us. So I'm inviting all of you to think about that language. Yeah, if I say certain things about myself, eventually after repetition, I'm going to believe it, and it's going to affect my behavior and my world view, right? I sort of touched on this before, but if I think I'm lazy or stupid, and I think people are mean and horrible, and I think the world is dangerous and cruel, that is going to have an effect on my health and my well-being, my state of mind. Versus if I say, I think I'm trying the best that I can, people are essentially good and helpful, the world is beautiful, that has an impact as well on my body and my mind. So I'm really inviting you to think about the language that we use specifically. So write some stuff down. These affirmations activate the reward system of the brain. So the feel-good hormones begin to kick in, and we start to feel a little bit better. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So some general tips. I mentioned earlier that I wasn't going to touch on, some of the things that we've already heard about in mainstream culture, and many things we've probably tried that have been very effective. But I've just put a few here. There's a really long list, but for the sake of time, I've just added a few that I thought might be helpful. So number one is sleep and rest. So sleep and rest are essential to our health and well-being. Until fairly recently, it was almost ignored. I mean, if you ask somebody, what is your healthcare plan, or what's your mental health plan, healthcare plan, people didn't mention sleep. They talk about diet and exercise. Absolutely, all those things are essential. But when I see someone and they're coming in to see me about anxiety or generalized anxiety, first thing I do is an assessment on their sleep. How much are they getting? What's the quality of their sleep? Are they feeling rested and rejuvenated when they wake up? What is their sleep routine? What are the habits they have around sleep? It's really important. If we don't get enough sleep, and we know this, we all know this. We've all been there. You don't get enough sleep chronically over a number of days, a number of nights. It affects everything. We get more anxious. We have a short temper. It affects how productive we are, like everything, relationships. Sleep is really important. If it goes on for too long, of course, go and speak to your medical practitioner. You may have to get a sleep study done. You may have to do other things, but really paying attention to that and what our sleep routines look like is very important. Number two, stay connected. So CSARN absolutely is one way for all of us to stay socially connected. The WHO identified, I think 2 years before the pandemic, that social connectedness, social cohesion is the #1 social determinant of health and wellness. So other social determinants, just to put this in a context, would be housing, food, good food, healthy food, access to clean water, safe environments, safe neighborhoods, all kinds of different things, healthy choices, resources, education. Those are social determinants of health, but staying connected is the #1. And it's now apparent to us since the pandemic started, of course, that we can stay connected in many different ways, which is actually great news. Like we can do FaceTime, we can do webinars, we can do Zoom, we can do phone, all kinds of different ways to stay connected. There was something I read recently that even our short, brief little conversations that we have with the grocery cashier or someone standing at a bus stop or somebody delivering something, apparently those short conversations stimulate the brain body and actually is quite healthy and quite developmental for the growth of our own brain. I'm not sure why, but it sounds pretty good to me. So keep your affiliations, join your groups, join online support groups if you want to. I run a seniors program at the community health center that I work at. And one of the things I've been doing is doing mindfulness meditation on Zoom with those seniors. And they were quick to get on board with that. And it's quite easy to do on Zoom. And then these are seniors with many mobility issues, many health issues. They can stay in their own comfortable little spot, and the meditation ends and they don't have to get on the TTC and they don't have to find parking and they don't have to get all stressed out. So it's really quite, we need to be deliberate about how we connect with other human beings. Okay, volunteering. So U of T did a study. I don't know how they measured this, but they did measure that when people volunteer, helpers benefit from helping. And apparently people who volunteer are 40% happier than people who don't. And again, it doesn't have to be big, but it could be telephone support, friendly telephone check-ins, volunteering. It comes in so many different ways. We know that with different populations. So if you can manage to volunteer, apparently from the studies I've read, it's pretty effective in elevating our mood, and it gives us an outward focus. Anxiety and depression are very, very much in the mind. It's in this box, and we get really, really, and I say this respectfully, we get very self-absorbed and we go inward, and it can get kind of claustrophobic. So volunteering, everybody wins, and it pulls us out of ourself with a different focus. Social prescriptions, I think people have heard of this, maybe not. So doctors, nurses, social workers, therapists are all starting to do social prescriptions. And my bias would be to add, yes, go out and forest walk. Yes, go by the beach, do some walks, enjoy nature. Nature nurtures us. Nature is extremely important to us. But I would also add arts and culture, because I think, I'm going to speak personally, if I'm really having a bad day, I'm getting the blues, if I go and I look at some art of some kind, whether it's a play, a film, a painting, I read a poem, I love poetry, I'm uplifted by that. I'm inspired by that, because for me, it is the excellence of human nature. And I know that sounds lofty, but we are a part of nature. And when we see something beautiful like the ocean or forests or wildlife, I think, it's my bias, that the arts and culture of humanity is our excellence, if I can say that, like a ballet or, a symphony or whatever. Like, it's just, yes. So a social prescription, I would say to my clients, would involve arts and culture. Limits and boundaries, huge subject. I can't cover that only superficially, but limits, no means no. No is a full and complete sentence. We all have limits. Every human being has limits. And I think we're all better off if we acknowledge them and we give ourselves permission to have those limits. Yeah, and limits to energy, limits to time, limits to all kinds of things. Boundaries. Boundaries are essential. This is a nutshell, but boundaries are really about protecting what we value and what's important to us. So we value certainly resources, money and so forth, and certainly physicality, but boundaries around psychic energy, emotional energy, like psychological energy, emotional energy, boundaries around who we spend time with, how we spend our time. And I think of a metaphor for boundaries as being a fence with a gate. And the gate you can open and close anytime you want. And the gate, it's flexible. It's a bit flexible. If our boundaries are too rigid, we become isolated, lonely, maybe angry, suspicious. We get very closed in and contracted. So we want those boundaries to be a little bit flexible. And of course, boundaries change and they'll change as we change. Sometimes we are feeling a particular way. We haven't got a lot to give, and we got to protect our time and our energy, and we have to know that. So yeah, limits and boundaries are very healthy. And activism. So if people are feeling overwhelmed by some of the great global situations, that we're all facing these days, maybe you might want to entertain some type of activism. Action of any kind will lift us out of symptoms of depression and anxiety. So a letter, a phone call, joining a coalition, finding your niche, if you will, and just really feeling like you're making a difference, and you are, and it helps us to feel like we're making a contribution. So saying yes to this life with radical, energized acceptance, even if it means we are hibernating in winter, and underneath that, remember, there's that blanket of snow and that frozen ground, but things are still growing, things are still happening, and they're waiting, just waiting for spring. Next slide, please. Thank you. So it's at this point that I would like to do one final meditation with you. This comes from the work of Christian Neff, self-compassion and meditation. So let's, given what day it is today, let's celebrate self-love. And I'm going to set it up first a little bit, and then we can go into it together. I'll do it with you. So to do this meditation, I would like you to think of an event, pretty recent, some kind of event, situation that created some kind of difficulty for you, something uncomfortable that has a little bit of an emotional tug at you. It could be a conversation you had with someone. It could be personal or work related. It could be something you did or said, something somebody else did or said, whatever, but not a big one that's going to pull the rug rather, out from underneath you. So not 100-pound weight, but a 10-pound weight situation. Okay. And I want you to think for a moment about the details of that situation, if you will. Okay. And before we start, I also want to introduce the idea of a self-compassion gesture. So what does that mean? Well, there are a number of choices, and I'm going to ask you to pick one. So a self-compassion gesture is a gesture of nurturance and warmth and caring. You might decide to touch your own cheek, which you see is quite, quite simple, or your hands on your heart, and you're going to apply a little bit of pressure so you can actually feel the impact. It could be patting your own knee. It could be holding your own hand like you might a grandmother, or a dear friend. It may be stroking your arm. I want you to try and pick one of those gestures and stick with it for the meditation. So you've picked a situation that creates a little bit of an impact for you, a little bit of challenge. So on the count of 3, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and get into a nice posture that's gentle, that signifies you're about to meditate. And Yeah, and we'll begin together. 1, 2, 3. So I'd like you to bring up the event that you've chosen. And just again, kind of re-experiencing the who, what, where, when, who was there, what happened, what was said, what wasn't said. How did you feel? Where were you? Maybe what people were wearing, what you were wearing, how it ended. And really go into that experience. And now that you've recreated this situation for yourself, I'd like you to say this to yourself or out loud if you can, that this is a moment of suffering. This is a moment of suffering and difficulty and challenge. And say to yourself, this hurts. This might even be painful. This is stressful. So you're acknowledging those feelings. You're acknowledging the impact of that event, creating some space for it. And then I'd like you to say to yourself, suffering is a part of life. All human beings suffer. This is part of our shared humanity. And we all suffer to different degrees, different circumstances. There's maybe a different flavor to our suffering, but nevertheless, this is how we connect with each other. This is part of being alive. We all suffer, and we all experience pain and difficulty. We are not alone with that. And then I'd like you to say to yourself, and this is where you're going to use that gesture of self-compassion, whichever one you decided on. And you're going to say with a very calm, soothing, and gentle, tender attitude. And if you wish, you can say it out loud. May I be kind to myself. May I be kind to myself. May I be patient with myself. May I forgive myself, and may I be strong. And may I know that I am not alone in this common humanity, and that all humans suffer. May I give myself permission to be kind to myself, to send some loving kindness to myself, and to understand and appreciate and say, I'm doing the best that I can. I'm doing the best that I can. And if it doesn't resonate for you, if this language doesn't resonate for you, if it doesn't feel real, then imagine a very dear friend or a loved one comes to you with a difficulty. And imagine what you would say to that loved one, to that dear friend. You might say, I care about you. I'm here for you. I'm listening. And I want you to know that. I want you to know I care. And if you can, if it's available to you, see if you can send that message to yourself. And as we begin to come to the end of this meditation, I invite you to take these moments of self-compassion and allow them to enter into the next moments of your day. And know that this is available to you anytime that you need it. I'll count to 3 and we'll proceed. 1, 2, 3. And I'd like you to just take a moment to observe how that feels in the body. If there's any sensations that exist in the body or in the mind. Thank you. Christian Neff, the work of Christian Neff, Self-Compassion. Next slide, please. So I think we're at that time we can open up for comments, questions, reflections, and be kind to yourself. Being kind to yourself is good for the world. One final last comment. I want you to leave you with this. I want you to think about this. However you celebrate being alive, I want you to do more of that if you can. Whether it's dancing, singing, writing, gardening, whatever it is, just think about how you celebrate being alive and find the joy in that. Thank you.
Jory, that was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
It was just delightful. Solange, could you stop sharing? We only have one question at the moment,
Okay.
and it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning about the experience with the director who began and ended a rehearsal session. And Pat Hedman of BC, who is an actor and director, asked this question: what was the technique or what was the practice that the director used, or does that matter?
Well, if I remember correctly, he was using what's called open monitoring meditation. So not guided. I mean, he himself wasn't an instructor, but he understood enough that he got everyone to just, take a posture, a meditation posture, and he asked them to connect to breath and to try and ground themselves and release kind of all the moments that piled up and led to them arriving at the rehearsal hall, and trying to create more space for them to brainstorm and be more creative. And at the end, I think he did it more as a reflective piece. So what happened during the rehearsal, and people had some thoughts about that, but he was very much tuned into like the idea that it's going to open up creativity. Yeah.
Okay. And it does come down to the breath at the end, doesn't it?
Always does. I always say that's your home base. That's your refuge. Always
Right.
come to the breath.
Excellent. I think that does it today,
Okay.
Jory. This was absolutely delightful. I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And take care. We'll talk
Thank
again.
you so much, everyone. Enjoy your sunshine if it's available to. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Jory
Bye-bye.
Morrow. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It has been a really, really interesting hour and 20 minutes from what I can see. We have more webinars coming up over the next couple of months. If you were part of the group that took part in our social media webinars, 101 and 201 with Boyd Neal, we've got 301, which is kind of an advanced one coming up in the next few weeks. We'll be telling you more about that. We're going to be presenting a webinar on taxes for artists because it is coming up to that time after all. And also we'll be joining with our friends at Carfac to present a webinar on artistic legacy, preparing your artistic legacy. So keep an eye on our website at www.ca or csarn.ca/ webinars, and you will be able to find out more about that. So in the meantime, please take care, be well, have a creative day, know that you are loved. And we'll be talking again soon.